Hello, how are you doing? So today I'm back with another video. I will be talking about grammar. Today I'm going to be talking about the general idea of learning grammar, not so much the grammar of any specific language just yet, although I may go deeper into that in a later video. So if you can recall from my last video, I talked about how to acquire more vocabulary, and as I believe that is a very important part, it's very essential obviously in becoming a more advanced speaker. However, first, before you get there, before you can even really, I guess, consider yourself intermediate, you have to really have a good grasp of the grammar. So, similar to my last video, I will be giving you 3 pieces of advice. So, number 1. Each language has its own unique grammar, so you must treat it accordingly. For instance, if you're trying to learn Spanish, right, and you're a native English speaker, you might notice that there are some commonalities between Spanish and English. You might notice that. But what you need to do whenever you're first trying to learn the grammar of a new language is not try to compare it to your native language. Don't do that. What you need to do is you need to understand why there are certain mechanics and certain functions in that language and how it works in that language. As I said, there are certain elements, certain grammatical functions, what have you, in each language that are going to be unique to that language, right? Like there are some things in Spanish that we just don't have in English and vice versa, and I mean it's the same for Portuguese and any other language. So, being that as it is, you need to treat whatever that grammatical function is, whatever the grammatical structure is of that language, unique to that language, because that's what it is inherently. So whenever you go into it, you need to treat it as its own distinct entity, as something that exists by itself. It's independent of all other things you've ever learned. Everything I've said thus far brings me into my second point, which is do not try to understand a grammatical structure, a grammatical function, whatever, in a new language by thinking of it in your native language. Don't do that. I'm going to use this example a million more times. So let's say you're a native English speaker and you're going to learn Spanish and you get the por and para, which are 2 prepositions in the Spanish language. And you try to make sense of them in English, you're going to think they mean something like for or by, right? The 2 prepositions in English. There are so many things wrong with that, and let me explain why. So, by using your English thinking brain, you try to understand a Spanish concept, which is wrong. You need to think in Spanish to understand a Spanish concept inherently, right? For instance, let's say you're solving for the area of a triangle, which is 1/2 base times height, but you're using the formula for circumference of a circle. Whatever you get, you might get a number, I'm sure you will, but it's going to be wrong. It's the same thing. This is a parallel to what I just said. If you're trying to understand something in a new language, a new grammatical structure of a new language, you have to think in that language. You have to understand it in that language and how it makes sense in that language. I'm just urging you watching this video, if you're going to learn a new language, or let's say you can already speak a foreign language, but you feel like your understanding of the grammar in the foreign language isn't that sound. And then I would recommend going back to the basics, whatever that is for the language that you speak, and really trying to think of it in that language. Just do that, please, because if you try to make sense of something, if you're making sense of a foreign language in your native language, it's 99% of the time not going to be right. And I think this is because people try to understand certain concepts in languages using language general means, right? By language general means. And that's not right. What you should be using are language specific means. So make sense of whatever that grammatical function is in that language. Don't try to come up with this general rule of thumb because it's not going to work. You need to look at, if it's por and para in Spanish, you need to look at how it works in Spanish. You need to look at why it works in Spanish. You need to look at its use in Spanish. Because inherently, you will never see that in English because that does not exist in English. So don't even begin to try to understand a foreign concept with your native language's way of thinking. This then brings me to my next point, which is in the beginning. Do not use direct translations. So let's say you're a native English speaker and you're trying to learn Spanish and you're trying to translate the sentence "Fuimos por Atlanta." You put it into like a direct translator or something. You're probably gonna get something like "We went through Atlanta." Okay, in the context, maybe that's not wrong. But let's say you're still a beginner and you don't understand how else the word or the preposition por can function in a sentence. So you go on thinking, oh, well, por means through, right? Because I typed it into the translator and it said we went through Atlanta. That is wrong. That is just one use of the word por. It can be used in several different ways. So in order for you to understand this, like I said before, first of all, do not put it in a translator. Do not do that. And secondly, understand it in that language, right? Understand the mechanic. Understand the function of it in that language, because that is inherent to understanding how to use it. The reason I get so fired up about this specific topic is because I think each language has so many things to offer, whether it be like the beautiful complexities of the language, or ways to say different words, or anything really. But for you to truly grasp the beautiful elements of the language, you need to first, well, understand the grammar, have a grasp of the vocabulary, yes. But also, as I said before, you need to have a deeper understanding of the language, a deeper understanding of the grammatical structure, of the grammatical logic. You need to, this is necessary, this is imperative for you to understand the beautiful complexities that the language has, right? And first, before all of this can happen, you need to think in that language. You need to understand that language for what it is. When you're learning a new language, you're learning the grammatical structure of a new language, approach it not with caution, but be conscientious of what it is, which is something unique in and of itself. Even if there are commonalities, even if there are cognates, which there will be. For instance, in Spanish, or not Spanish, in Portuguese and English, and in English the word for port is port, right? In Portuguese it's porto. But, okay, that's a cognate, sure. But if you only rely on cognates, where is that really going to get you? Because there's a word for dog in English, right? We love dogs. And Portuguese is cachorro. That's nothing alike. It's literally nothing alike. So if you only rely on cognates, you're going to be in a pretty bad place. So I would recommend not relying on cognates, not relying on direct translations, relying on actually changing the way you think and thinking in that language, even if it means opening up a space for that language. Personally, I think if you implement these three things, you will gain a deeper understanding in the language you're trying to learn. So to really become an advanced speaker, you need to have a deeper understanding. You can't just have a surface level understanding of the grammatical structure of the language. You need to actually understand like the several uses of the different grammatical elements, and like how they work in different contexts and things like that. And to actually understand that, again, not to just have a surface level understanding of it, but to actually in your chest, you understand it. To actually understand it, you need to think like this. You need to change the way you think. Because you can't actually have a deeper understanding of a foreign concept while thinking in your native language. It's just not going to work. It might sound like a really oversimplified example, but just bear with me. Let's say you're in a organic chemistry class, which, as a lot of people say, it's a pretty difficult class. But instead of buying the book you need to buy for your course, you buy a book in elementary algebra. And that's the book you read all semester, and you're relying on that book to get you through the class. What kind of sense does that make? Again, this might be a very oversimplified example, but just bear with me. It's the same logic. It is the exact same logic, because you're bringing in this completely separate set of rules and this completely separate way of thinking and this completely separate entity, right? And you're trying to make sense of it with something different entirely. It is the same thing. So I ask you to at least try the three things that I've suggested here today. And if you try them, they don't work for you, that is okay. Everybody learns differently. Like I said before, I am not claiming to be an expert. I'm not a linguist, not a language professor, not any of that stuff. I'm just giving you suggestions based off of what has worked for me in the past, what has worked for people I know, and I am hoping that they work for you as well. If you are still learning your language, you're still going hard at it, I hope that this works for you. I hope that it benefits you in some way. I hope my other video benefits you in some way. I hope that you continue going very hard in your language learning efforts, and I know that it's going to come to you. You will learn the language, and I hope that everything goes well for you, and I will see you in the next video.